My name is Alexa Miller. I'm 21 years old, and I live in a quiet suburban community in Austin, Texas, the kind of place people move to because they think nothing ever happens here. White fences, identical mailboxes, HOA signs at the entrance like a warning, not a welcome. I moved in 6 months ago after my dad helped me buy a small townhouse near my college. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. I followed the rules, paid my dues, kept my lawn clean, and stayed out of trouble. I waved at neighbors, smiled at board members. I was invisible, or so I thought. On December 31st, New Year's Eve, I came home around 8:40 p.m. I had parked my car in front of my unit, something everyone did, especially during holidays when guests filled the driveways. I was unlocking my door when I saw the yellow paper tucked under my windshield wiper. At first, I thought it was a flyer. It wasn't. It was a violation notice. Improper parking fine, $450. Holiday enforcement fee included. I actually laughed out loud. $450. On New Year's Eve? I checked the time on the notice. 8:32 p.m. That meant someone from the HOA board had driven through the neighborhood, scanning cars while families were celebrating inside. I went straight to the HOA portal on my phone. That's when I saw it. A new update, posted that same morning. Holiday enforcement policy, zero tolerance from December 31st, January 1st. No email, no warning, no community vote, just a fine. I emailed the HOA immediately, attaching photos showing at least 6 other cars parked the same way on my street. I even quoted Section 4.12 of the bylaws, which clearly stated holiday exceptions for short-term parking. I expected a reply the next day. Instead, at 11:57 p.m., 3 minutes before the new year, my phone buzzed. Fine is valid. Pay within 48 hours to avoid additional penalties. HOA Compliance Office. No explanation. No discussion. That's when I realized something. This wasn't about parking. This was about power. They thought because I was young, female, new, I would just pay and move on. Standing there alone in my kitchen, fireworks already starting outside, I made a quiet promise to myself. I wasn't going to fight them emotionally. I was going to fight them correctly. And if they wanted to make New Year's about rules and money, I would make it about consequences. The next morning, while the neighborhood was still quiet from New Year's celebrations, I did something the HOA board never expected. I opened my laptop, not to complain, not to vent, but to read. I logged into the HOA portal again, this time ignoring the violation page completely. I went straight to the documents section, the one most residents never touch. PDFs stacked on PDFs, amendments, meeting minutes, archived emails. That's when I realized something important. This HOA didn't run on fairness. It ran on people. And people make mistakes. The board had 5 members. Their names appeared everywhere once I knew where to look. Richard Coleman, president, mid-50s, retired, lived on authority like it was oxygen. Linda Harris, treasurer, obsessive about numbers, careless about rules. Mark Benson, compliance officer, the man who probably slipped that yellow paper under my windshield. Donna Reed, secretary, quiet, signed documents without reading them. And Ethan Cole, vice president, youngest on the board, new like me, but power had already changed him. I clicked into the meeting minutes from November. That's when my heart skipped. There was no vote recorded for a holiday enforcement policy. No motion, no second, no approval. Just a single line added later. Policy effective immediately. I opened the bylaws and cross-checked everything. Section 2.3 clearly stated any policy affecting fines required a majority vote and 7-day written notice to residents. They had done neither. I leaned back in my chair and smiled for the first time since the fine. They hadn't just overcharged me. They had broken their own rules. But I didn't email them yet. That would be too obvious. Too emotional. Instead, I did what my dad always taught me to do. I documented everything. Screenshots, timestamps, archived versions of the portal using public web tools. I even downloaded older copies of the bylaws to compare changes. That's when I noticed something even bigger. The fine amount for 5 wasn't standard. According to the official fine schedule, improper parking was $75. Even with a repeat violation, it capped at $150. So where did $450 come from? I followed the money trail. Linda Harris, the treasurer, had quietly added an administrative processing fee. 3 months ago, never approved, never disclosed. That fee had been applied to every violation since October. My hands started shaking, but not from fear, from clarity. This wasn't just about me anymore. By that evening, I finally replied to the HOA email. Short, polite, dangerous. Thank you for your response. Before submitting payment, please provide documentation showing board approval for the holiday enforcement policy and a breakdown justifying the fine amount under Section 2.3 of the bylaws. Alexa Miller. I sent it at 6:14 p.m. They didn't reply that night. They didn't reply the next day either. But at 9:06 a.m. on January 3rd, I received a notification. Late fee applied, $50. That was their mistake, because now they had officially escalated the situation, and I was done playing defense. I opened a new folder on my desktop and named it HOA Legal Leverage. They thought I was just a girl who parked wrong. They were about to learn. I was the reason their system was about to collapse. The email that changed everything. I didn't go to a lawyer right away. That's another thing people get wrong about revenge. They think it starts with shouting or threats. It doesn't. It starts with pressure. Instead of calling an attorney, I scheduled a free legal clinic appointment through my university. 30 minutes. One advisor. No drama. I walked in with a folder so thick the advisor raised her eyebrows before I even sat down. By the time I finished explaining, she leaned back and said something I'll never forget. You don't need to sue them yet. You need to let them realize you could. She helped me draft one email. Not angry, not emotional, professional, calm, surgical. I sent it to the entire HOA board and CC'd the community management company. After reviewing the bylaws, financial records, and recent enforcement actions, I have identified multiple violations of Sections 2.3, 4.12, and 7.1. Please confirm whether legal counsel has reviewed the holiday enforcement policy and the administrative fees applied since October. I am requesting all related records under Texas Property Code 209 within 10 business days. Alexa Miller. I hit send at 2:37 p.m. The response wasn't immediate, but the silence was loud. That evening, something strange happened. The HOA portal went down. By morning, the holiday enforcement policy post was gone. The fine amount on my account quietly changed from $500 to $75. No apology, no explanation. That told me everything. They were scrambling. At noon, I got my first direct email from Richard Coleman, the HOA president. Alexa, let's resolve this amicably. There may have been some confusion regarding the fine. Confusion. I didn't reply. Instead, I checked the neighborhood Facebook group. And there it was. A post from a neighbor on Oak Lane. Anyone else get charged crazy fees recently? Mine was $600 for trash cans. Then another comment. And another. By PM, the thread had 47 comments. Different streets. Different violations. Same administrative fee. That's when I realized something terrifying for them. I wasn't alone. At 8:19 p.m., Linda Harris, the treasurer, emailed me directly. Please do not share misleading information with residents. That was the moment I knew I had them, because I hadn't shared anything. Yet, I replied with one sentence. I haven't, but residents are asking questions. The next morning, a notice appeared on every door. Emergency HOA meeting attendance strongly encouraged. Strongly encouraged. I smiled, because emergency meetings don't happen unless someone's afraid. And they weren't afraid of me. They were afraid of what happens when quiet neighborhoods stop being quiet. I laid out my notes on the table, printed everything, and highlighted the laws they violated. For the first time since New Year's Eve, I didn't feel angry. I felt ready. Because when that meeting started, I wasn't going in as a resident. I was going in as a witness. The meeting they tried to control. The emergency HOA meeting was scheduled for 7:00 p.m. at the community clubhouse. By 6:30, the parking lot was already full. That alone told me this had gone way beyond my fine. Neighbors I'd barely seen before were standing in small groups, whispering, holding printed notices, screenshots on their phones. Some looked confused. Others looked angry. A few looked scared. I walked in quietly and sat in the second row. The HOA board sat at a long folding table up front. Nameplates lined up like shields. Richard Coleman cleared his throat, tapping the microphone as if that could bring order back. This meeting is to address misinformation and concerns regarding recent enforcement actions, he said. Misinformation. I wrote that word down. Linda Harris avoided eye contact, flipping through papers too fast. Mark Benson leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, jaw tight. Donna Reed stared at her notes. Ethan Cole kept checking his phone. Richard continued, "We assure everyone the HOA operates within the law." A hand shot up. Then another. Then another. A woman in the back stood without waiting to be called on. "I was charged $720 for leaving my garage open for 15 minutes, she said. "Explain that." Murmurs filled the room. A man near the aisle followed. "My fine doubled overnight with no notice." Richard raised his voice. "Please, one at a time." That's when he looked at me. "Alexa," he said, smiling tightly, "you requested this meeting. Would you like to clarify your concerns?" Every head turned. This was their plan, make me look like the problem. I stood up calmly and walked to the front. "I didn't request this meeting," I said evenly. "You did." Silence. I held up a printed copy of the bylaws. I was fined under a policy that was never voted on, never noticed, and never approved. Section 2.3 requires all three. I looked directly at Linda. "And the administrative fee added since October." I continued. "There is no board approval for it, which makes every fine collected under it refundable." Gasps. Linda's face went pale. "That's not accurate," Richard snapped. I clicked my phone and projected screenshots onto the clubhouse. Screen meeting minutes, timestamps, archived documents. "These are your records," I said. "Not mine." Mark Benson finally spoke. "You're not a lawyer." "No." I agreed. "But the Texas Property Code doesn't require me to be one to read it." Applause broke out. Richard slammed his hand on the table. "This meeting is getting out of hand." Then Donna Reed spoke for the first time. "I don't remember voting on that fee," she said softly. The room froze. Ethan looked up from his phone. Linda stammered, "We discussed it informally." "That's not a vote," someone shouted. That's when Richard stood abruptly. "We'll take this under advisement and adjourn." "No," a voice said. It wasn't mine. It was the crowd. People stood. Phones recorded. Questions flew. And in that chaos, I realized something powerful. I didn't need to attack them anymore. They were unraveling themselves. As the meeting dissolved into shouting, I quietly gathered my papers and walked out. Because this wasn't the end. This was the crack. And once power cracks, it never seals back the same way. Silence is a weapon. The morning after the meeting, my phone was full of notifications. Missed calls, voicemails, emails marked urgent. From the HOA, from neighbors, from people who suddenly wanted to talk. I ignored all of it. That was the hardest part, not responding when I knew I had the upper hand. But silence does something powerful. It makes guilty people panic. And panic makes mistakes. By noon, the HOA sent out a community-wide email. Correction notice. Recent enforcement actions may have contained administrative errors. A review is underway. Please refrain from speculation. Speculation. That word again. Meanwhile, something else started happening quietly. Fines disappeared. Not mine, everyone's. Neighbors messaged me screenshots showing their balances reset to zero overnight. Some even received refunds labeled accounting adjustment. No announcement. No apology. Just quiet cleanup. That afternoon, I received a certified letter. Inside was a notice of intent to resolve, legal language wrapped in politeness. They offered to waive my fine entirely if I agreed to avoid further disruption. I read it twice and smiled. They didn't ask me to stop because I was wrong. They asked me to stop because I was effective. Instead of replying, I forwarded the letter to the university legal clinic and waited. That evening, Ethan Cole knocked on my door. Not as a board member, as a person. "I didn't know about the fee," he said quickly. "Linda handled finances. Richard pushed enforcement. I let him talk." People always reveal the truth when they think it will save them. He admitted the management company had warned them months ago about compliance issues. That Richard ignored it. That Linda approved charges without votes. That Mark enforced anyway. I thanked him and documented everything. 2 days later, the HOA portal posted another update. Special audit approved, external review pending. That meant lawyers. And once lawyers get involved, timelines change. Power shifts. The neighborhood Facebook group exploded. Someone created a poll. Do you trust the current HOA board? The results weren't even close. That night, I finally spoke publicly. Not emotionally, not accusingly, just facts. I posted screenshots, bylaws, timelines, laws, and ended with one sentence. This isn't personal, it's procedural. By morning, Richard Coleman resigned. No announcement, no farewell, just gone. Linda followed 2 days later. The board that fined me on New Year's Eve no longer existed. But revenge isn't just about watching people fall. It's about making sure they never rise the same way again. And I wasn't finished, because now they wanted me involved. They asked me to join them. The email came from the management company, not the HOA. That alone told me how serious things had become. Given recent events, we believe resident involvement is essential. Several community members have suggested you consider a temporary board position. I stared at the screen for a long time. This was the part of the story people never talk about, the moment when the system you challenge asks you to become part of it. Neighbors stopped me on my walks, thanked me, asked questions. Some looked relieved, others looked nervous. Please join, one woman said. We need someone like you, someone like me. I went back to the bylaws again. This time, not to fight but to understand what power actually meant. Board members, controlled budgets, vendors, fines, enforcement tone, transparency. They could protect people or punish them. The first interim meeting was tense. 3 remaining board members sat at the table. 2 empty chairs where Richard and Linda used to sit. A lawyer joined via video. The management rep avoided eye contact with me. They nominated me for interim compliance oversight. I asked one question. Will I have full access to records? The lawyer paused. Yes. I accepted. The moment I was sworn in, the atmosphere changed. Folders appeared that had never been shared before. Vendor contracts, legal warnings, emails marked confidential. And that's when I saw it. A contract with the management company that paid bonuses based on fine revenue, percentage-based. That explained everything. Fines weren't about order. They were about profit. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't accuse. I copied everything. At the next meeting, I proposed 3 motions. Freeze all fines pending audit. Refund improperly collected fees. Amend bylaws to require resident notice for any enforcement change. All passed. Unanimously. Because no one wanted to be next. That night, I sat alone in my living room, the weight of it all finally settling in. I had power now. Real power. And power is dangerous if you don't decide what you're going to do with it. I could expose everything. Or I could rebuild it. That's when my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You should stop digging. Some of us don't want this going public. I didn't reply. I saved it. Because now, the story wasn't just about fines. It was about who had something to hide. And how far they'd go to keep it hidden. The threat that proved everything. The message stayed on my phone all night. I didn't block the number. I didn't respond. Threats lose their power when you treat them like evidence instead of fear. The next morning, I filed a formal public records request under Texas law. Not just HOA documents, emails between the board and the management company, dating back 2 years. The lawyer didn't like that. At the emergency follow-up meeting, he warned everyone about potential reputational harm. That phrase again. Reputation is what people protect when the facts aren't on their side. 3 days later, the records started coming in. Hundreds of emails. Most were boring. Some were sloppy. And a few were devastating. One thread discussed maximizing compliance, revenue during holidays. Another mentioned younger residents being less likely to challenge fines. My name wasn't in those emails, but my age group was. I highlighted everything. Then I did something strategic. I didn't release it all. I shared just enough with the interim board to force a vote terminate the management company contract. The vote passed. That afternoon, the management company sent a cease and desist letter accusing me of defamation. I forwarded it to a local investigative reporter whose email I found at the bottom of a community news site. No commentary, just documents. 2 days later, my phone rang. "Hi, this is Karen from Austin. Community Watch. We're looking into HOA enforcement abuses. Can we talk?" By the end of the week, neighbors from other communities started messaging me. Same company, same fines, same patterns. The story was bigger than us. That's when the anonymous number texted again. "Last chance. You don't understand who you're messing with." I smiled, because I finally did. They weren't powerful because they were right. They were powerful because no one had ever documented them. And now, they couldn't stop the timeline. The reporter asked for one on-camera quote. "Just one," I said. This started with a parking fine. It ended with transparency. The article went live on a Monday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, the management company was under state review. And by Wednesday, they offered a settlement. Not to the HOA, to me. That's when I knew the trap was working. The offer I refused. By Thursday morning, I had a thick envelope waiting at my door. It was from the management company's legal team. Inside, a settlement offer, $5,000 for inconvenience, a promise of confidentiality, a request that I refrain from public comments about their practices. They were trying to buy my silence. I laughed out loud. They thought a 21-year-old girl could be intimidated with money. I did not reply immediately. Instead, I opened my laptop and pulled up all the emails, fines, bylaws, and community posts I had collected over the past 2 weeks. I cross-referenced everything and drafted a comprehensive report for the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs. Every illegitimate fine, every unapproved policy, every hidden administrative fee, it was all in one document, complete with screenshots, timestamps, and board signatures. Then I uploaded the report, submitted it officially, and copied the local news outlet that had interviewed me last week. By the time I looked up from my laptop, my inbox was flooded. Richard Coleman attempting to reach me personally. Linda Harris begging for mediation. Anonymous HOA threats warning me to stop. Emails from neighbors, thanking me, offering support. I didn't respond. The next day, the state opened an investigation into the HOA and management company practices. That's when things really shifted. The HOA members who remained started contacting me personally, asking for advice on fixing their mistakes and rebuilding trust. Instead of taking their calls, I organized a community town hall. I created a clear agenda: address fines fairly, improve transparency, introduce resident oversight. Every motion I proposed passed unanimously. Even the skeptical older members were on board. By the end of the town hall, the HOA had publicly reversed all fines issued improperly since October, refunded every resident affected, and committed to monthly open meetings. The management company? They quietly withdrew their contracts, citing unforeseen complications in their processes. I still received one last anonymous text that night. "You've gone too far. Watch your back." I smiled again. They didn't realize the most powerful move I'd made wasn't the fines, the reports, or the settlements. It was letting the law and the community do the work. Revenge, it turns out, isn't personal. It's procedural. Victory in plain sight. By the start of February, the neighborhood felt different. The streets that had once been quiet, passive, and slightly tense were now alive. Neighbors waved at each other. People stopped to talk in their driveways. Even the community Facebook group had turned into a forum for questions, suggestions, and neighborhood events, not complaints about arbitrary fines. The HOA board, now fully restructured, was transparent and accountable. My interim position had been formalized, but instead of wielding power for myself, I used it to educate and protect residents. During the monthly meeting, a motion passed unanimously. All residents could access enforcement records at any time, without needing to submit formal requests. This was huge. A simple change, but it prevented future abuses. I finally allowed myself to reflect. Sitting at my kitchen table, sipping coffee, I thought about the first day I got that New Year's Eve fine. How small and powerless I had felt, standing in the cold, holding that yellow paper. Now, 6 weeks later, the tables had turned. Not because I shouted louder or threatened more, because I followed the rules, documented every step, and let the system expose itself. Neighbors approached me with small gestures of gratitude, cookies, cards, even handwritten notes thanking me for standing up when no one else would. Some shared stories of fines they'd quietly paid, ashamed or afraid to challenge. Now, they laughed and told me they felt empowered. The state investigation into the management company and former board members continued. But from my perspective, the major victories were already won. Policies had changed. Fines had been refunded. Trust was slowly being rebuilt. Even Ethan Cole, the young former board member who had confessed some of the wrongdoing, sent me a text one evening. "You showed me how power can be used responsibly. Thank you." And that's when I realized the best revenge isn't humiliation. It's transformation. I had started as Alexa, a 21-year-old resident fined unfairly on New Year's Eve. I ended as someone who changed the rules of the game. The neighborhood learned something too. They learned that compliance without accountability is meaningless. That even the quietest, youngest resident can make a difference if they know the law and trust their voice. And as I looked out at the street that night, fireworks still fading in the distance, I felt something unexpected: pride, relief, and yes, satisfaction. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge is justice served correctly, on your own terms. The new year, my terms. By the time the next new year rolled around, the neighborhood felt completely different. The fear, tension, and petty fines that had defined my first month here were gone. People laughed in their yards. Kids played in the streets without fear. And even the HOA meetings were actually productive instead of performative. I, Alexa Miller, 21 years old, had started the year fighting for fairness and ended it reshaping the entire system. The lessons were everywhere, if anyone cared to notice. Rules meant nothing without transparency. Power meant little without accountability. And courage wasn't loud, it was methodical, precise, and sometimes quiet. I often walked past the houses where neighbors had once avoided me. Now they waved. Some thanked me again. One elderly woman even baked cookies and left them on my doorstep with a note: "For the girl who reminded us that rules are for everyone, not just the powerful." The management company that had thrived on fear and fines? Gone. Their contracts dissolved. Investigations ongoing. Board members who had abused authority, forced to resign under scrutiny, and aware that their reputation was permanently damaged. And me? I had grown, not just in confidence, but in patience, strategy, and understanding human nature. Revenge wasn't about anger, it was about leveraging truth and procedure until the system corrected itself. I kept a folder on my laptop titled New Year's Eve Fine Case Study. It wasn't about boasting. It was about remembering how a single moment, a single unjust action, could become the spark for transformation. Some nights, I still get anonymous texts from those old board members, warnings disguised as threats. I don't reply. I don't need to. They've already learned what I did. They've seen the consequences of trying to abuse power without accountability. Fireworks lit up the sky that New Year's Eve, exactly a year after the first fine. I sat on my porch, a warm cup of coffee in hand, and smiled. This year, the fireworks weren't just for celebration, they were a reminder of how far I'd come. I had arrived as Alexa, a young resident. I left as Alexa, a force that even a powerful HOA couldn't ignore. And the quiet truth I'll leave with anyone listening: sometimes, the system fears one prepared voice more than 100 angry ones. Because justice doesn't shout. It follows rules, and when done right, it's unstoppable.